So I follow what I call a natural diet, and natural in the context of how the food was grown or raised. Is that apple, and is it an heirloom variety? Was it made with certain various fertilizers or pesticides, or was that cow on its natural grasses? Things like that. How was the food that you're putting into your mouth created? Essentially determines whether or not you should be eating it. And although I take a lot of ideas from paleo, keto, zero carb, all those things, the premise of my diet is natural, high quality foods. By doing this, I'm reducing inflammation to pretty much zero, which removes anything negative I'm putting in my body, and I'm consuming only the highest vitamin foods, which gives my body the fuel and allows it to function at its optimal metabolic state. In the context of modern and foods that I have access to, those wild plant foods and things like berries, nuts, natural raw wild plant foods, I don't really have access to. The only foods that I have access to that are natural are those animal foods, grass-fed foods, pasture-raised, egg yolks, raw dairy, things like that, wild-caught fish. And one thing I take from the paleo diet is that 65 to 70% of our caloric intake was from animal foods. The rest was wild plant foods. Of that 65 to 70% animal foods was where we got all of our nutrients and vitamins that we needed for optimal health. Our omega-3 fatty acids, our vitamins A, our fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. All those are from animal foods, and they are contained in animal foods in their most bioavailable forms. Now, the requirement is that you consume the whole animal and that it's high quality. So if you're consuming conventionally raised beef, ribeye steaks, you're not getting the vitamins you need. Whereas if you consume a whole, wild mackerel, roe included, that's where you get your complete nutrition. And again, it really depends on the quality. If you're going to consume dairy, try to get local grass-fed dairy that's raw. I mean, all of those things factor into its vitamin content, how inflammatory it is, and how much it benefits you. Things that are excluded from the diet, whether it's because they're not made naturally or maybe they're food that you're not sure you should consume. Like, hey, maybe you don't want to eat rye bread. Well, if you take heirloom rye grains, you mill them yourself and you ferment them naturally, and I don't see why you shouldn't eat that. But the difference between that rye loaf and the rye loaf you get in the supermarket, which is made with half of 48 chromosome wheat flour, is drastically different. Same with things like adding, or maybe having a glass of wine with dinner. Does it really matter if it's a biodynamic wine versus a wine that has sulfites in it? In the big picture, no. The main thing here is that you have that basis of high vitamin animal foods in your diet. As soon as you establish that, there's a ton of leeway. But once 65 to 75% of your diet is high vitamin animal foods, I don't care what else you eat. I mean, if that other 30% is Twix bars, yeah, we might have to have a little bit of a conversation. But whether you like to drink wine or eat blueberries or have fruit with cream for dessert every night, or a little bit of ice cream, all of those things are individual to you. And hey, I'm lactose intolerant, I'm allergic to dairy, it makes me break out really badly, so I avoid it. I don't want to go out of my way to spend $8 on a pint of biodynamic berries, and I don't care enough to enjoy, the average conventional berries in the supermarket, so I might not just consume them. All of these other things that I can go on and on about aren't really relative. What's the most important thing is establish that 65 to 70% animal food quality base in your diet. Even little things like spices, seasoning, salting your food, adding things, those don't matter if you're eating 50 grams of beef liver every day. Trust me, you'll stop worrying about that stuff instantly. Seasonality plays more into theorizing about the diet than actual practicalness, because we get stuff shipped in from all over the world at all times, and just because the ground is hard outside doesn't mean someone's not going to eat an apple. What this does apply to for me is when I buy my meats, and ideally you'd buy your animals when they're their fattest and fall off the summer grasses. It tastes better, it's more nutrient dense, and there's a big difference between a piece of beef fat that tastes like hay and cow shit, and a piece of beef fat that tastes like butterscotch, and I've had both. One thing I have incorporated into this natural idea is fasting, because we would not have access to food for, and I'll go more into this in another video, but I'll say this: I've gone 2 weeks without eating food, and I have not been hungry. And I think that is solely because of the nutrient content of my diet. It gives my body everything it needs, and it's not going to crave anything. Whereas other people on other diets tend to constantly be hungry and craving foods. Hey, maybe I'm just crazy, but I like to think there's some merit to what I'm doing. To sum everything up, nutrient-dense animal foods, high-quality animal foods is the basis of my diet, and everything else are conversations that I will have in future videos to make. You know, I mean, I'll give an example meal just to give you guys an idea of what my diet is. So, like yesterday I had some beef liver, raw beef liver with salmon roe, and some ribeye steaks, and some egg yolks. You know, I'll pretty much focusing on, you know, which of these animal foods have what vitamins and how can I get them every day. Okay, I need omega-3 fatty acids, got my salmon roe. I need vitamin A, I got my liver, it's also in salmon roe, it's also in the ribeye. I need my vitamin K, okay, I'm eating liver and salmon roe has vitamin K. My goal is to get all of those vitamins in my meals every day I'm eating. And it's not necessarily every day. I try to get a certain amount of vitamins on a weekly basis. That's kind of the best way to gauge your nutrient density. I mean, then there's things like electrolytes and vitamin D and things I've talked about and we'll talk about more in future videos. But I think that's a pretty good synopsis of my diet, and I think I've given you guys an idea of where I'm coming from. And although what I'm eating now is, yeah, I'm eating a lot of raw meat, which seems really close to zero carb or carnivorous diet. That's not the actual theory behind my diet, and it's not what I actually believe someone should necessarily be eating. You know, I have no problem eating grains, fruits, vegetables, anything. It's just in what context and what can I actually benefit from doing it.